Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the UEFA Dynasty League podcast. I'm your host, Erik of VFL Wolfsburg, and today we are going to be ranking the La Liga teams for the upcoming 2020 season. With me, I have some great co-hosts. First, Matt, our co-commissioner of Tottenham Hotspur. Matt, how are you tonight?
Doing great. I'm happy to be here. It's been a little while, and let's get rolling.
Yeah, I basically had to drag him on against his free will, so I hope you guys enjoy it because it took a lot of effort for me there. But we are so happy to have you, Matt. I wish you were on more. But moving on to our regular co-host, Fred. He doesn't miss a podcast, and we love him for it. Of Hercules, part of La Liga. Fred, how you doing tonight?
I literally have nothing better to do. I bottled a couple beers today, so I'm pretty happy. I got a new Session IPA and semi-imperial brown ale that did not turn out as strong as we were going for. But
maybe we'll get some beer talk mixed in. But fortunately, I just have a Bublé in front of me, so it's just sober podcasting for Erik here. But moving on to our last co-host, Donnie, who's been so kind to join us these past few weeks. Donnie of Atalanta. How you doing tonight, Donnie?
Doing real good. Spent the weekend cleaning for the arrival of some family members coming down to Texas from Wisconsin. So this is a nice breakup of the cleaning and preparing that my wife
is anyone getting with. Donnie? Is it me?
Yeah, he sounds fine. Yeah.
He sounds great.
Yeah. Give a second here.
Silky smooth.
So is your family smuggling down some New Glarus from Wisconsin for you?
I don't actually think I got them to bring any. I had them bring Brewing Project out of Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and Drecker out of the Dakotas. I didn't even ask for any. Usually my mom is pretty good on grabbing a bunch of Moon Man for me from New Glarus.
Nice.
What are any of them smuggling down sleeves, or you good on the sleeve front?
It was 111 degrees today.
All right, I'm sorry. What the hell's Erik doing?
I think he's changing his headset, maybe? I don't know. He's on mute, so he can't talk to us anyway. There we go.
Yeah. I'm sorry, guys. I started listening after I transitioned. I was like, wait, Donnie's not talking. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait, no, I just can't hear everyone. Everyone's talking, so I had to switch headsets. Sorry about that. I got some of it talking about beer and then Matt talking about your balls. I don't know what happened.
That was basically it.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
We need to quickly transition into the rankings here.
Okay, well, that does it for the shenanigans, and we'll go straight into our power rankings. Just like the last two divisions, we will go bottom to top. And starting at the bottom, we have 12th ranked Valencia. Looking at Valencia last season, he did finish in last. He made it to the quarterfinals in the Domestic Cup, and he did make it to the qualifying round of the Champions League where he fell. He was an average of 11.6 amongst the rankers. Matt and Donnie were the only ones that didn't have him last. If we just take a look at his team real quick here, he's got Philip Rivers and Teddy Bridgewater as his quarterbacks. Kenyon Drake and James Conner are his starting RBs. Depth guys include Vaughn, Adrian Peterson, and Tariq Cohen. At receiver, he has some issues. Manuel Sanders, Brandon Ayuk, and Demarcus Robinson are his best players there. And he has Cook, Olsen, and Witten at tight end. So, Matt, why don't we start with you? What do you think Seamus is going here with this team?
Well, if you think back dating to the inaugural draft, I mean, he went really redraft heavy, wasn't really looking too far down the line, I think. But even so, he's improved his team a little bit heading into this year, I think. He's going to have that second quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater now. I really like his options at running back, and that's kind of why I didn't have him in last. I know he's got some wide receiver deficiencies there, but having Connor and Drake, I think are two solid RB1s, and then he does have options after that too. Adrian Peterson's going to play a role, Duke Johnson, Keyshawn Vaughn. So I think he's got enough guys at that spot And then at tight end too, Jared Cook, Greg Olson, those guys will both get starts too. So, like I said, I mean, the wide receivers are rough. Manny Sanders, Brandon Ayuk, who you don't really know what you're going to get out of him. Wide receivers are in really rough shape. He's playing for right now, and I'm not sure it's going to be enough, but he's got enough running back, I think, for me.
Yeah, and I think he's made some head scratching trades. I think he's certainly either new to Dynasty or trying a different approach compared to the consensus. But it certainly seemed like he was in a spot where he should pivot maybe towards more rebuild, and he just went all in. So certainly some pieces that can help, but I don't think there's enough compared to what seems to me a strong division. And as we go through, we'll tackle those. But Donnie, do you have any other take here on Valencia that you can see or not see here?
No, I just think that for me, this team is above my bottom ranked team just by the sheer fact that I think with a little bit of luck on choosing the right tight end and wide receivers each week, they're not going to be the bottom team in this group.
Fred, I know you're more with me that this team is really the most lacking in talent. It's got to be the receivers, right?
It is, and that was the note I made to myself when I was ranking these teams. I'm not a huge fan of Rivers and Teddy Bridgewater. I think he can probably get replacement level quarterback play from someone else who's not Teddy Bridgewater, or even if he didn't want to start him in Superflex at all, there's options available. This is a team that is basically going to live and die by their lack of wide receivers. If Ayuk is hurt seriously and still pinning your hopes on a rookie in a shortened offseason, I think it probably isn't a good place to want to be. Is he going to be starting 3 tight ends? Is he going to be starting one of his? I guess maybe Adrian Peterson is a starter for this team. It's just it's going to be a long season.
Yeah, and even if Valencia does hit on a few pieces here, my argument for him being last would be that without those receivers, it's just going to be a higher floor than possibly a team that doesn't really have any starters, but not enough where you have a bunch of breakout stars. There's no elite players on this team, so certainly can get caught in that 80-point range where you're just going to draw a bunch of people, which doesn't help you win your division.
Yeah, I think his biggest drawback is that he's in the wrong division. If he was in your division, this is a team that we would probably say is middling with a little bit of luck, could compete for this or that. But there's a bunch of strong teams that he's going to be competing against on a weekly basis that are going to make his life kind of hell.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. And looking at the tiers, it certainly seems like among the rankers, this is the team that is going to struggle the most. He's almost 2 points behind the second to last on average. And that's a good transition to go to our second to last team right now. And that is Real Madrid with an average of 9.8 as our 11th team. Donnie was the highest on him, had him at 8th. Fred and I had Georgia's team ranked 11th, which was tied for the worst. Looking at how Real Madrid did last year, finished mid-table in 7th, did not qualify for Champions League, but they did get to the semifinals in their domestic cup where they were finally defeated. If we're looking at his team for the 2020 season, he has Jared Goff, Tua, and Alex Smith at QB. At running back, he has Melvin Gordon, Sony Michel, and Ito Smith. At receiver, a little stronger, looking with DK Metcalf, T.Y. Hilton, Will Fuller, and T. Higgins. And at tight end, he's got 2 solid options with Evan Ingram and Austin Hooper. So we're going to start with Donnie here because, Donnie, you had him ranked the highest. What do you like about this team that puts him over the bottom teams in this division?
I would assume what probably put me with this team higher than some of the others was I do think that he's going to have a second starting quarterback pretty early in the season, whether it be, Alex Smith performing a miracle and coming back and getting the starting job back there, or Tua stepping in and being healthy and taking over that team early on in the season. I think Melvin Gordon, I did hear something this week that he was struggling a bit with the altitude, and that was limiting his practicing quite a bit. So that concerns me a bit there. I'd feel better with that, with, some stronger word out of camp on Melvin Gordon. Not a big Sony Michel fan, so there's not a lot of depth there if Melvin Gordon doesn't come in and, be a startable running back for him. Love the tight end group. I think obviously with Ingram's injury issues, he needs both of those two to stay healthy and playing for that to be, potentially two lock starters for him. And I feel like there's enough in the wide receiver group for him to, fill out the rest of the roster. But I think him being this number 8 team really hinges upon that second quarterback starter emerging early in the season. If that doesn't happen, then I think I'm much more close to where you guys are at with this guy or with this team.
Right. And Donnie, one thing you said about Melvin Gordon not adjusting to the altitude, I do listen to a few other football podcasts, and they mentioned that almost every new player in Denver kind of has that same problem where when they first play there, they have that. If it's an ongoing issue, like say we get to mid-September and he's still struggling, then it would be an issue. But like everyone that goes to Denver for the first time, like has this adjusting period. And I guess with coronavirus and all this, maybe it's a little bit delayed, but they weren't worried about his production based on the altitude for the upcoming season. Right. But Fred, you're more worried about this team than Donnie. And what's your main concern?
Honestly, I don't see a whole lot of difference between this team and Valencia. If you swap the strength that Valencia has at running back with the strength that Madrid has at receiver, they're basically the same after that. Tight ends are probably a little bit better on this team, but Goff and Tua, they're not currently two starting quarterbacks. So you give you give the edge to Valencia there. I just think on the whole, there's a little more talent on this roster. He can certainly have a much better ceiling than I'm giving him credit for. I'll admit that. He's got guys that have upside. He's got two solid tight ends. He's got Hilton and Metcalf. If Gordon can hit and even outside of the altitude problems, is that the whole reason right now that he appears to be splitting time with Lindsey? No. I don't know. I think it's partially the offensive scheme as well, and so he could be in a situation where he doesn't have really a starting running back either.
Right, and just looking, if he doesn't have that second QB, he doesn't have he'll be starting two tight ends, and even then he's going to be struggling to find that 8th flex. And then when Will Fuller gets hurt, he's going to be looking for yet another flex. So it's certainly a depth concern as well as a quality starting concern. But Matt, what do you think? Do you have anything to add to this combo?
Yeah, that was Fred just touched up on it. That's the big thing with Melvin for me is it's not like he was brought into Denver to be the one and only guy. He's fighting with Philip Lindsay. They're going to eat into each other there. So the big question mark is at running back for George. Do you have starters there? Even his depth guys appear to not really have a role this year. So that's the big question mark there. I do think he's got a little bit more at wide receiver than some in this division. And like Donnie had said, I think fairly early on in the season he will get that second quarterback for his flex. But yeah, it's going to be a long season for George.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't have his picks in front of me, but I think he is pivoting towards, not this season, towards another season. So maybe more doing a little better than Valencia, but nonetheless, they should be competing.
Just barely. He's got his own picks, and he's got an extra second and 2 extra thirds. So he hasn't really gone all in on the rebuild yet in terms of stacking himself with future picks.
Okay. So, yeah, certainly a team that, even though Donnie has him at 8th, team that we think will be near the bottom. But it's a good time to move on to our 10th place team here that slotted just barely above Real Madrid, and that's of Getafe. An average of 9.4 among the rankers, where Fred was the highest. among us four with 9. Justin actually had him ranked 8, which brought him up a little bit. Last year was another struggling season for him. So the third consecutive team that we think will do poor again. 9th last season, didn't get a win in the domestic cup, didn't qualify for Champions League. So certainly not looking great for him again this season. But looking at his team, I can see why he would be better than at least those bottom teams. Wentz and Cousins is a solid 1-2 punch at quarterback. Melvin Gordon, James Conner, McKinnon, Cohen, and Love. So some good starters and some good depth there. At receiver, he's got Sterling Shepard and Michael Gallup, as well as Ward, Aguilar, and Corey Davis. And at tight end, he's got some options: Jonnu Smith, Dallas Goddard, and Erik Ebron. So certainly someone that should be filling out a lineup regardless of how many injuries he has. We will start with you, Fred, because you had him ranked the highest among us by 1 at 9. But what's going to be his main concern moving into the 2020 season?
Depth. He needs one of his guys that are borderline starters to step in and really fill that role. He's got some guys. Looking at the spreadsheet you have here, he's got more names on that list than obviously any of the teams that we've looked at before, because he's got a little bit of a deeper roster. But if he can get somebody like McKinnon, Cohen, Love, or Ebron to step up and be, even Corey Davis, he's still considered potential talent. The Devontae Parker breakout path after 6 or 7 years or whatever. But if one of these guys comes into their own, this is a roster that I'm not going to say they're going to make waves, but they're going to be competitive.
Right. You certainly can see the upside of him breaking out at the bottom of the table for me instead of the 2 teams that we reviewed, because there's no spot where he's putting up 0 points each week. Even if he has one guy go down in each position, he's still going to field a lineup. Well, it might not be as good as some of the other lineups he's going against. They're still going to be putting up points and have a chance to get, touchdowns and this and that. So certainly exactly where I don't want my dynasty team to be, which is kind of like competing, but not really competing. Matt, do you have anything to add about Katafe here?
No, I mean, your guys' comments kind of are spot on. I mean, I had him ranked behind Madrid, who we just talked about, and I think it's just his lack of wide receivers. I look up and down, and I mean, I know he's got Gallup there, he's kind of an up and comer, but there's some competition for catches in Dallas now. Sterling Shepard, I think he's kind of an above average player, and beyond that, there's not much I like from the group. And then at running back, I'm not as high on Cohen and Love, and even McKinnon as others are. So even though those quarterbacks are very nice and he's got plenty of options at tight end, there's really nothing going on here that I like too much.
Yeah, certainly the rankers agree with you, Matt. Donnie, anyone that sticks out to you either positively or negatively on this roster?
No, I do think that the kind of the top end of this team is built around some pretty fragile players. You've got a high likelihood that Wentz and Connor miss time, possibly significant time, as they both have. So I think that's what kind of put this team down below. Like the starting pieces week 1 are probably going to look pretty good, and there's some depth at tight end and wide receiver to a degree. Not a bunch of names I super love there. Matt mentioned the wide receiver room in Dallas getting a little bit more crowded. That doesn't concern me as much as I'm hearing it talked about. They did lose Cobb and Witten, which were a significant amount of targets last year with a couple guys thriving. So I think as you replace those guys with a CD coming in, I think the offense will overall be better. So I think it's still a worthwhile team to have the pieces on. But no, I think kind of the opposite of the last team I talked about. I think they're going to go from having 2 quarterbacks to 1 and possibly down to 1 running back. early in the season.
Yeah, Dallas is an interesting case where I think the consensus among people is that they're going to be better, and with targets freeing up, they could support 3 receivers, kind of like the Packers of old, where they would support multiple receivers every single year. So certainly something that hopefully Getafe could get some production out of for sure. But moving on to our 9th place team here, we have Espanyol with an average of 9.2. So these, Real Madrid at 11, Getafe at 10, Espanyol at 9th. We're kind of all right, switching spots on and off here. And the interesting thing about his ranking here at 9th is that Fred has him ranked as 7th, while Matt and Donnie have him ranked as the last place team on this power ranking. So certainly some disparity among the rankers. Looking at how he did last season, he finished in 8th in the table, made the semifinals of his domestic cup, and lost in the qualifying round of Champions League. So another team that we anticipate being near the bottom of the table, and was last season. So a lot of consistency here out of La Liga. If we just pan over to his team real quick, he's got Drew Lock and Herbert at quarterback, so really young there. Looking at his running backs, he's got Joe Mixon, David Johnson, David Montgomery, and A.J. Dillon, so another really young core of running backs here. Looking at his receivers, he's got Brandon Cooks, Hollywood Brown, Michael Gallup, Brashad Perriman, and Traquan Smith rounding out that crew, and he has Mark Andrews at tight end. So Espanyol certainly has a team that might not be the best for 2020, but certainly a dynasty team that with a bunch of young assets. So let's start with you, Fred. 7th place. Why is he going to finish mid-table?
First, I'd like to point out that I didn't have him highest of anybody. Justin had him ranked 6th, which was actually ahead of me.
True.
But to talk about what I liked on this team, I think his running back stable and depth paired with wide receiver stable and depth is the best we've seen so far of any of these teams. Obviously, he has a hole at quarterback, but it's not as big of a hole as I guess others are making it out to be. I think Locke is going to be a serviceable starting quarterback, and Herbert, I don't know, one way or the other. We'll know whether he's anything by the end of the season. But I think even with only a single quarterback, the strength at tight end, the depth at running back, the depth at receiver makes up for that in week to week play. He can hide his second quarterback a little bit with some of these other guys if they do what he wants them to do. And to add to that, his team is set up to play for now because he's traded away a bunch of his draft picks for next season. So this is a win now attempt, at least for now. I mean, he can do something with it later, but he's all in right now for this season.
Yeah, and the assets, he doesn't have to worry about them tanking unless they actually get seriously injured because they're so young. They all should be playing in the 2021 season. But Donnie, let's start with you, who one of the rankers that have him last. And what's the concern that as Fred's comparing hole sizes, where's the hole that he's missing that's so big?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think he had said that we were overestimating the gap at quarterback, which is fair. I mean, Drew Lock could be serviceable, and they sure invested a lot in putting weapons around him. So if he doesn't come out and light it up with what they put around him, he's going to be out of a job. But I think that's kind of likely. I don't think that Herbert is going to see the field as a starter this year. I think from what I've seen, even their team on Hard Knocks, from what I've seen of Tyrod with that team, is he's taking a leadership role and taking hold of the offense. By far the best team Tyrod has been on, and I think he's an underrated just player in general. So I don't think he's going to have a second quarterback, and he may not even halfway through the season have a first quarterback. And I think that's what really knocked this team below all the others. The only running back on this team that I really like for this year is Joe Mixon, and his coach thinks he might have migraines right now, and he's threatening holdouts. So that doesn't make you feel good. There's not a lot of wide receivers, but I do like several of the ones that they have. I think I said in the last podcast, I think Traquan Smith is kind of the breakout candidate, my favorite breakout candidate for this year, a la like Chark or something similar. We're just not doing much and just starting to go off. And then the tight ends are solid too. But I think for me, it was just the lack of depth at quarterback and running back that did it for me.
Okay. And Matt, is that your concern as well?
No, actually not really. I mean, I like Locke. I think, he's someone like a QB2 that's actually got like more upside than Bridgewater. Just like Donnie said, there's a lot of tools there in Denver and stuff. For me, I don't like the running backs a whole ton outside of Joe Mixon, like you just said. I know David Johnson, the reports are really glowing for him so far in Houston, but boy, watching him in Arizona last year, he looked like a shell of his former self. So I think dynasty wise, there's guys in his running back crew that I do dig, but this year, no. David Montgomery is another guy that just suffered a terrible groin injury. So there's some worry there. And then at wide receiver, there's some guys that I think could do something, but I'm not a big Traquan Smith guy and others. And then at tight end, it's really just Mark Andrews. I mean, I can't – there's 5 other guys that you're not going to get much out of this year. So, for me, this is my last place team with Donnie, and they're all in the same kind of tier, those last 4 or 5 teams. But, I don't like this team this year very much.
Yeah, and I think why I ranked him a bit higher than you guys is that I expect Herbert to take over this season at some point, and I don't expect Drew Lock to lose that spot. And they should put up decent numbers. I don't anticipate them being top 10 quarterbacks, but you mix that with some of the guys like I don't anticipate Joe Mixon actually having a big injury concern. I think that Texans getting David Johnson, they paid for him with DeAndre Hopkins, and they also took on David Johnson's contract. So they're going to give him a chance, even if he's the worst player in the world. He's getting his chance to play. So I'm certainly not that down on this team. I actually was teetering on putting him a little higher than what I did on my rankings. But, it's still, even as we talk all through this, it's a bottom team in our eyes, just not, where on the bottom. It's not a team that someone's saying he's going to be a third-place team. But, beyond 2020, I'm more excited for this team than I am for this year. We'll move on to our 8th place team, and the average goes up a little more than what we've been. No, it doesn't. What am I talking about? Just 0.2 higher in the 8th spot, 9th on average, is Barcelona, Cam's team. And looking at how we rank them, I had them ranked the highest at 7th place, and Fred had him ranked the lowest at 10th. Actually, Justin did at 11th, but Justin's not here with us on the podcast today, so that's what I'm going off of. But if we want to take a quick look at Cam's team, he has Wentz and Goff at quarterback. His running backs are a bit of a concern. Royce Freeman, not sure which Brown that is, and Vaughn. His receivers are definitely his best options with Michael Thomas and DJ Moore. Mike Williams and Deebo Samuel are battling injuries before the season. And Jalen Reagor, who also has an injury today, and Rashad Perriman round out that crew. He's got Hayden Hurst and Noah Fant at tight end, which I think are 2 solid tight ends for this year. So I'll start on this team. Why I have him ranked so high is because he's one of those teams that's going to have the depth, assuming those guys come back from injury okay, which might be a problem for week 1 or 2, where he's starting one running back that might not be getting a bunch of carries, but the rest of the team makes up for it. He's going to be starting at least 1 great tight end. He's got 2 solid quarterbacks to start. He's got elite options at receiver that are putting up points, and that's why I have him ranked as high as I do. The running back isn't going to kill this team enough to make him a bottom table. That's why he's going to be in the middle for me. Fred, why is that one running back going to weigh him down so much, or is it something else?
No, that's it. I'm not happy with this running back core in any way at all. This is going to be hope and pray every week, and maybe try to scoop guys up off the waiver wire. Try to hope that you pick the week that Gus Edwards gets a touchdown. Unless CEH completely falls on his face and Darwin Thompson is handed the job in Kansas City, this is going to be a bad running back core. And he only has to start one. I understand that, but that's a deep hole compared to some of the other teams in this division, with the rosters and the players that they've got.
Yeah, maybe I am underestimating that hole a little bit. Donnie, I'm sure you see the same hole as Fred, right?
Yeah, 100%. There's going to be zeros on the scorecard at the running back position, more than once probably.
Yeah, you would think if he's going to compete, he'd make a move, but maybe he's not trying to compete this year. Matt, what do you see it more as?
Boy, yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out at running back. I mean, what's his best odds at a player this year? Is it Keyshawn Vaughn? I haven't heard much of him out of training camp at all. Is anything going on there? It is probably just Gus Edwards punching in a short touchdown here and there this year. But beyond that, like everyone's saying, I mean, everything else looks really nice. But yeah, I don't know.
It's not a complete roster. It's one of the it's missing a big piece for the way this league is designed.
Right, and I just realized you may have noticed I didn't give him an intro based on where he finished last year. That's because Barcelona has a new owner and was part of the dispersal draft. So this is someone that is new to the league and definitely has some good assets. But maybe he just took what he could out of that. Maybe the running back value was too high coming out of the dispersal. There wasn't enough running backs, and he went. This is the approach he took. I would have to go back and look and see, where the running back landed based on where he drafted. But I could certainly see coming out of a dispersal why there were certain positions you felt you couldn't get value at. There's only so many, picks.
Interesting enough, one of the other guys in that dispersal was actually a co-owned team, Deportivo, who we'll talk about later on, and we can see kind of how they constructed their team out of the same dispersal.
Talk about Barcelona by talking about Deportivo, Bill? I mean, Matt?
I'm just saying.
Okay, well, we'll see if he's the next team. And spoiler alert, he's not. We'll move on to that team, and that is Real Zaragoza, who, if you guys are unfamiliar with him, he is the reigning Champions League winner. So the champion among all four divisions is clocking in at seventh amongst rankers with a 9 average. No, a 7.8 average, excuse me. All the rankers had him ranked 7 through 9, not a big disparity there. So we all have him towards the middle of the table, maybe a little bit behind. He also finished as the runner-up in La Liga, and he also was the runner-up in the Domestic Cup. So coming off a fantastic season here, we certainly don't like him to repeat his success. Just good to go through his team real quick. He's got Ryan Tannehill and Tyrod Taylor at his QB spots. He's got McCaffrey, Ingram, and Tevin Coleman at running back. McKinnon and Love backing those guys up. At receiver, he has OBJ, Golden Tate, and Alan Lazard. And at tight end, he has Zach Ertz with Jimmy Graham as the backup. And certainly, I don't know how many moves Carl made over the offseason, but I don't even see how he won it with this team unless he had some problems. McCaffrey carrying probably helped him because McCaffrey was so good. And, other than that, who were his quarterbacks last season? It certainly wasn't Tannehill and Tyrod last season. We'll go reverse, Matt. What do you see here that why? How did he win before? What happened?
Yeah, I was trying to go and look at that quick, and then you called on me right away, so I'm in some trouble here. But yeah, a good question. I mean, he's got question marks top down on this team right now, and it could get even worse as we go into the season if Tannehill doesn't repeat his success from last year. I think really the bright spot on the team is McCaffrey, and then we're aging out with Tyrod Taylor and Mark Ingram and Golden Tate and stuff. So even Zach Ertz, I mean, he's going to start to slow here, and he's got some injury concerns. So yeah, I don't know.
Fred and Matt, maybe we could delay a little bit if you want to look into that, but if not, no pressure. Fred, what happened with this team? Do you know?
Yeah, I do actually. I've been looking at it while Matt was talking. He had Tom Brady and Marvin Jones on his roster last year at minimum, more than he has today. And if you look at what he's got now, he's got an extra first and 2 extra second round picks for 2021. So it appears to me that he is pivoting towards the future. He took his victory, and he's just going to rest on that for now, and try to reload for the future. And because of that, I have a feeling that a player like Mark Ingram is going to become available. He doesn't have a whole lot of old players. Golden Tate, yeah, maybe Zach Ertz, but he's still young enough that he can be the core of your tight end group. He got tremendous quarterback, numbers from Ryan Tannehill at the second half of last year, and I think that was probably what vaulted him. That plus Christian McCaffrey, of course. And when he's putting up 448 points in a league where most top running backs are putting up 250, that's just a massive, massive point differential that he took advantage of.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, McCaffrey was unreal last year. And I think you kind of have to look at the stats each day to remind yourself how awesome he was and how how different he was than even the top running backs. But Donnie, looking at this team, is there a way he can salvage getting into a Champions League spot, or should he be looking for 2021?
For him to do that, I think I need to be right about Tyrod Taylor. He's the broke man, Lamar Jackson. If he hangs out on the job all year, there's a chance there. I'm sure that Brady trade was done when it looked like Stidham had the job, and then this was probably the least happy team about the Cam signing of anyone, because if you look at it that way, he would have walked in with 3 starting quarterbacks, and that would have felt a lot better. So it looks like he held on possibly to the wrong quarterbacks, or if Tyrod works out, then he's getting real lucky. But I think Tyrod has to work out really well for this team to have a shot this year. The only player I'd see that we haven't really talked too much about that I do kind of like is Jermichael Hasty. This guy is really similar to Mostert in a lot of ways. So if he can find his way onto the field with some injuries or something like that, that's a sneaky player I like on this team besides the obvious ones. But yeah, I'm sure that the Brady trade was made thinking that he had Jarrett Stidham sitting there and Cam Newton wrecked this guy's year.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not a psychic, but something tells me that we're going to keep talking about that later in the podcast. That Stidham Patriots move. But we'll go ahead and move on here to our top half of the table, and we do have a big tier break here because clocking in at number 6 is Sevilla with an average of 5.4, which is 2.4 spots on average higher than Zaragoza. With Sevilla, Donnie, you have them ranked at 3rd at the highest. Matt and I have them ranked the lowest among us podcasters at 6th. Justin actually had him ranked 7. But going ahead and taking a quick look at Sevilla's production last year, he finished 3rd last season, made it to the group stage in the Champions League, made it to the quarterfinals in the Domestic Cup. So some success, but not as much as he probably hoped. And taking a quick look at Sevilla's team for 2020, he's got Cousins, Locke, and Cam Newton as his 3 QBs. At running back, he's got the 1-2 punch with McCaffrey and Elliott. Gibson may be getting a big chunk of those Washington carries as his 3rd RB, and he's got Hines as well. Looking at his receivers, he has Devontae Adams, Preston Williams, and Larry Fitzgerald. And at tight end, he has Austin Hooper and Kyle Rudolph. So I can certainly see why us as rankers had him ranked 2.4 spots higher than the previous team. It's certainly way more complete with some studs and some great QB depth and some upcoming options that could fill up the rest of those flex spots. But Donnie, why is he going to be a title contender here with this roster?
Because the only thing that he has to address is tight end depth, which is the easiest for him to be able to address. You look at his quarterbacks; he's got plenty to choose from there. You know, we were just looking at the last team there, and I jumped back last year in the championship week. Tom Brady put up just shy of 250, or just shy of. Oh shoot! Now I was looking at it anymore. Anyway, Tom Brady had an excellent championship week, and you just think that as smart of a coach as Bill Belichick is, he's going to get something great out of Cam this year. He has to be more useful in fantasy than Tom Brady was last year, and he was quite useful. So I think he's got plenty to look at quarterback there. He's got 2 of the top 3 running backs, and then if Antonio Gibson walks in and seizes the opportunity in front of him there and beats out a 50-year-old Adrian Peterson, you know, he potentially has 3 great running backs to choose from. Devontae Adams is a stud and has no competition for anything and just going to get fed over and over. Larry Fitz is still kicking. Preston Williams, he's looking good and supposedly healthy, and Parker is on the sidelines again. And so he's got a lot of opportunity there. There's not a ton of depth behind those guys that I really adore. And then the tight end group really hinging on Hooper producing to what, you know, they paid to get him on the team there. So I think the Browns will progress a bit this year. If that involves Austin Hooper or not in a relevant way for fantasy is still a question mark to me. But so that's something that if I was this team, I would be trying to patch that with a couple like low end but high upside tight ends like a Jonnu Smith or Dawson Knox, or, you know, I'd be trying to get some of those types of guys on this team to make me feel a little bit better about it.
Yeah, and Donnie, you're certainly winning me over a little bit. I'm looking at it and like, where really? I had him 6th. Matt, you also had him at 6th, and what do you think Donnie's missing that makes him more mid-table than the Champions League qualifying spot?
Well, I mean, Donnie did kind of touch up on it. He did say that really the only spot he has to address is tight end depth, and I don't really agree with that. Wide receiver for me is really lacking. I mean, he's got 7 or 8 guys rostered, and really only 3 are startable. There's a lot of fat at his wide receiver core. But I think there's a lot to like. He's got, like you said, 2 of the top 3 running backs, and that's going to bring him a long way in this division, I think, alone. And then you consider what he has to work with that quarterback. I agree with Donnie. I think we are going to get something out of Cam this year, and you know, he could very well move one of those quarterbacks too for some wide receiver depth or a nice option there. So I think he's got options to play with. It's just his wide receivers are really kind of wigging me out a little bit.
Yeah, and along the lines of, you know, not having those receivers, it's the depth of the flex spot where even, you know, if you lost one of the top players here, there's nobody really that's going to fill in to put up like good numbers. Yeah, sure, you could find a decent flex every other week maybe, but not enough to keep him consistent. But he does have those QBs where he could trade if he did get into a hairy spot. Fred, anything we missed while talking about this team?
I think he's getting a little extra credit for having 3 quarterbacks, but the problem with those 3 quarterbacks is, are any of them better than back end QB1s? Or, you know, you're talking about guys who are going to be somewhere around QB 14, 15, 16, all 3 of them. I don't see much of a ceiling. Maybe there's a ceiling for Locke if he grows into his possible potential. But you know, Newton and Cousins, I think, are what they are, and I don't think that is going to be enough to save his season. His running backs are fantastic. Pair that with the one receiver he has, I think he's going to put up some amazing numbers, and it's going to be completely random. When he gets a week where Cousins and Locke hits, obviously Zeke and CMC are going to hit practically every week. Adams is going to hit practically every week, but then you've got guys like some second tier running back or Larry Fitzgerald, or I'm not real thrilled about Austin Hooper in Cleveland this year. I just don't see them using their tight end so well that he's going to put up numbers like he did when he was in Atlanta. So he's got fantastic studs and a lot of question marks or depth questions that he has to work through. Whether that means he moves one of those quarterbacks or not, I don't know. He might just roll with it and hope for the best. And not to say I didn't like his team. I think I had him ranked 5th overall. So this is a team that's going to compete. It's going to do well. It's just I don't think he matches up as well as some of the teams that are ahead of him.
Right. Yeah. We've hit the tier break where we I think as rankers clearly have a top 6. I don't think anyone really ranked anyone below 6 among these teams that we're going through. So it's the top half of the table in our opinions, and he just missed out being a little bit higher, but certainly doesn't mean he can't do it if things fall his way. But we'll move on to our 5th place team. And this is a new co-owned team, as Matt had explained earlier. Deportivo slotted in as 5th, so no previous history for this team. But so far of the dispersal teams that we've talked about, I think he is looking the most, or they, are looking the most impressive coming out of the dispersal. And just to look at our rankings real quick, we 5 on average, almost across the board 5s. Donnie had 4, and Fred had 6. But we all have them getting into a Champions League qualifying spot if things go as we expect. Looking at his team, he's got the glorious Dak Prescott and Joe Burrow at QBs. At running back, great depth here with Nick Chubb, Chris Carson, James Conner, and Devin Singletary. More great options at receiver with Robert Woods, Jarvis Landry, Brandon Cooks, and Robbie Anderson. And at tight end, TJ Hawkinson or Disley will have to start, but certainly no great options there. Among all the teams we talked about, you look at those flexes, and even though there aren't any surefire elite players, maybe Chubbs or Woods you would put there, but the depth is tremendous compared to the teams we've been talking about. And coming out of a dispersal, that's even harder to do. So bravo, tip my cap to these guys. Donnie, you have them ranked 4th, so why do you like them a little more than us? Can you convince us?
So I think the reason I like this team a little bit more will make more sense when I talk about the other 2 teams that I like a little bit less than you guys. So I guess what I'll pivot to instead is why I like Sevilla a little bit more than this team. And to me, it was, well, you look at these 2 quarterbacks and they're better than most likely the 2 that the last team are going to be starting. Most likely, Burrow's a rookie, and that's always a question mark. And then with the COVID shortened season, a lot to learn that could be trouble, especially early on for this team. And then, you've got the second best quarterback in Dallas there too. He's going to get some quality starts for him. So, but there's only 2, and the last team had 3. So that's where I take a few points off in comparison to the 2. And then I just feel like this running back team, there's a lot of known names on here, but to me, they're all names being overdrafted to the quality of player that you're getting besides Nick Chubb. But he's still got that, kind of crowded backfield issue, and his production after Hunt came back really dipped. And that has me pretty concerned. And maybe if Chubb is looking good to start the season, if Hunt gets traded before the season starts, which is still, possible and maybe even likely, I like this team quite a bit more. But I just, I'm not a big fan of any of the players besides Chubb at running back. Devin Singletary is already getting beat out. Like I said earlier, I think James Conner is probably one of the most fragile running backs that is getting drafted as a starter. And I'm not a Chris Carson fan. So that's what those 2 things is what brought this team below Sevilla for me.
Gotcha. And despite all those things you said, you still had him ranked the highest among us. So yeah, it's certainly a team where even if you don't, the options don't pan out, he'll still have a team that is putting up numbers. And certainly out of the dispersal, you might not get your top grade picks. So he might have been the true winner out of there. But Fred, you're a little more worried on this team. And is it just because it's more depth than it is studs?
My notes for this team say I'm saying Dak, Chubb, and Woods are the only reliable guys that he's got on the roster right now. Everyone else that he's going to be counting on a weekly basis is either a guy who hasn't had a history of staying healthy or doesn't have a history of being consistent or is a rookie or maybe a combination of all of them. I mean, when you're talking about the question marks of Burrow, Carson, Connor, Singletary, even Landry coming off injury, and Hawkinson, Cooks has concussion history. And these guys are all producers when they're on the field. Will they be on the field consistently to do that for this team? And that's the reason I put him below Sevilla myself.
Now, what's Landry's injury? What is he coming off of?
Ankle, I think. Has he been practicing? Or he had off-season surgery, didn't he?
He might have, but I was thinking. I'm reading it right now. Bothered by his hip since April, May, where he suffered a fractured sacrum.
Yeah, that could be a question mark.
Jarvis Landry will be worked into team drills over the next few weeks and progressing nicely. And I think the one thing that it's a good point because he is coming off an injury, but with Landry, he's played almost every single game, and he's so consistent. So even though he doesn't get the respect because he's kind of a loser with his personality, his play is there, especially as a PPR receiver. But I forgot about the surgery he got. That certainly adds a question mark.
Yeah, and that's basically it for me. That's we're picking nits here, trying to find a flaw and comparing teams to each other, and this is a team that's going to play well. It's going to probably be inconsistent week to week, depending on which of these guys are on the field or in the starting lineup. But that's the same thing we all have to deal with in the best case scenarios as well.
Right. Matt, you have anything to add on this team? I know you had them ranked 5th, which is right on average.
Yeah, everything that was just talked about is very fair, just with the injury histories of a lot of these guys. But compared to the teams we reviewed so far, I'd rather roll the dice on this team than theirs for sure. Donnie had kind of said of that last team, Sevilla, he's got 3 quarterbacks. But as Fred mentioned, what's their ceiling? 13, 14, 15 at quarterback, that kind of range right there. Give me Burrow to have just as high of a ceiling as any one of those guys. Unquestioned starter on a team that is playing for the future. They know they're not going to win anything this year. They're just going to allow them to chuck the football around and make mistakes, which is good for fantasy, So and there's players there. So as far as I'm concerned, that's a plus to only have 2 quarterbacks to have to worry about on this team. And then you're absolutely right. He's not going to get 16 games out of Carson and Landry and all these guys who have an injury history. Connor too. But there's too much to like on this team. Wide receiver is bloated. There's a lot of fat on that part of the lineup too. But I don't know. I like the upside of a lot of these guys, and I'd rather chase it than the rest of the teams in this league so far. Division, I should say, not league. Division so far.
Yeah. Some good points on Deportivo, and best of luck. Certainly get props building a team like this coming out of the dispersal. So well done, boys. But we will move on to our maybe most socially active team, who wound up coming in 4th in our power rankings, and that is Granada. Granada last season finished in 4th, so probably in the Champions League this year, and no success. Lost the first domestic cup, did not qualify for Champions League. Among the rankers, he was an average of 4.2 in his 4th spot. Unfortunately, I had him ranked the highest at 3rd, so I get to praise Tyrell. Yeah, it's fucking wonderful. And at 6th, Donnie has him the lowest. And so just looking at his team real quick, and he just recently made a trade, but he's got Kyler Murray, Drew Lock, and Tyrod Taylor, who we both previously talked about at quarterback. At running back, he has Clyde Edwards-Helaire and David Montgomery. At receiver, he has Beckham Jr. He's got Robert Woods, Allen Robinson, Terry McLaurin, and a few other guys that my screen is cut off right now. Give me 1 second. Hollywood Brown. He's got a few other guys that I didn't write down as well. And at tight end, he has Waller and Gronk. And I guess I will start praising Chase, which I'd really not like to do, is that he's got great receivers to support, Edwards-Helaire and Kyler Murray, who should be putting up a tremendous amount of points. He's got QBs that he could plug in at a super flex spot, and he's got two tight ends where one of them will get hot, and it should be easy for him to plug them in. So I don't see him not putting up a fuck ton of points each week, unfortunately. And I hope he really trades out of this and makes his team miserable. But right now, I do really like it. Donnie, talk me out of it. Why should I hate his team more? And I really like to.
Well, he might be just trading the team poorly in steps, and he took that first step for you. So that's already working in your favor. That trade, I don't understand it. Took a major downgrade at running back to upgrade his, and I'll put in air quotes, to upgrade his strongest position. There's no guarantee OBJ is OBJ anymore. So I don't understand, taking Barkley, which is a stud and probably going to be this year's, Christian McCaffrey. CMC's probably not going to repeat. It just rarely happens at running back. And I think the best bet at who's going to be that this year was Saquon Barkley. And he traded him for a rookie who nobody was talking about until he got drafted where he was drafted, because he's the least exciting first round running back that I can remember being drafted. And he bolstered his wide receiver core with a question mark. So I don't understand that trade. And I think that thinking on trading will lead to further poor trades, and it'll probably work out just the way you'd like it to, Erik.
Yeah, certainly. And maybe Matt and Fred can enlighten you on the Chase trades, because this is not an unfamiliar move that he made.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. He has his guys, and when he wants a guy, he goes and gets him. Kind of, damn the torpedoes, and I'll put him on my roster no matter what. From the time that he traded for Saquon Barkley, he was shopping him, and he was actively shopping him, thinking that he was just going to get a massive payment to get someone to take him off his roster. And I think he got good value, in terms of a dynasty trade. He got a top end running back. Unfortunately, he basically got him at what his peak value has to be in order to replace Saquon Barkley, right? And hopes and prayers that OBJ can be what he was in the past. So it's a team that he's going to win games. He's going to score a lot of points. His quarterbacks are probably the best and deepest we've seen so far. So that just gives him that guaranteed production every single week. He's got 4 or 5 capable of starting receivers. I don't like his tight ends. I think Darren Waller is going to come down very hard from the career year that he had, and I don't know that Gronk is. Yeah, let's be generous and say his 2020 season is going to be somewhere between his 2018 and 2017 seasons. I don't think it can be the Gronk that we thought, or that we used to have, especially considering the players that are on that team and the competition even at his own position on Tampa Bay.
Yeah. Matt, I saw you shaking your head about the tight ends. You agree with Fred there?
Yeah, Waller's got to come back down to earth, and I'm also not big on Gronk. For the point you just mentioned, there's 2 other pass catching tight ends there in Tampa Bay, so some position dilution there, I think, in Tampa. It's beating the same old drum, but I think a lot more has to go right for Edwards-Helaire to end up a top 10 running back this year than it does Saquon ending up a top 3. So I think he downgraded, and as Donnie mentioned, it was to upgrade a position he was already very, very strong at. So I don't get that trade. I like his team a lot more if Saquon's still on there for sure.
So yeah, Chase, if you ever wind up listening to this, tell us why we're wrong. I'm sure you have very strong opinions on it. But still, even looking at this team with the trade, we had them ranked between 3 and 6 on an average of 4.2. So certainly a team we see competing despite this trade and help with Barkley. We might even had him ranked higher. But go ahead, Fred.
I was going to say the good news is he'll lose his first 2 games, and none of these guys will be on his roster in week 3.
There is an unpredictability to trying to predict a Chase team where he will not have he might have 1 or 2 pieces that are the same. He is a trader, that's for sure. But we'll move on to our third place team among the rankers, and that is a household name. That's Fred of Hercules with an average of 3.4. Matt and Fred being the highest at 3, and Justin had ranked at 2, and Donnie with the lowest at 5. Looking at Fred last season, he got 6th despite his best interests, because I know he wasn't trying to compete early on. He did lose in the first round of the Domestic Cup, and he did lose in the qualifying rounds of Champions League. Fred, I'm going to put your team up, but why don't you give us the rundown since it is your team?
Oh, let's see. Who do I have?
I put up the screen.
Yeah. I've built this team, through the draft and through trades, and I had a bunch of draft picks coming into the season with the intention of they would all be high draft picks the way you and Mike got all your draft picks to be high picks. The unfortunate thing was that none of my picks were higher than the equivalent of 1.07. So I kind of had to wheel and deal to do some things with this roster outside of getting some of the top players that were available in this draft. I've got guys I love in Murray and Chubb, Hill and Evans. I traded for Juju during the draft. I traded for Terry McLaurin a couple weeks ago. I love the depth that I have, or the potential that I have at receiver with guys like Brian Edwards and Justin Jefferson and Preston Williams. All of them could come into their own for me. I've got reasonable running back depth with the 2 guys from Baltimore. I just don't have a second quarterback, and I think some of the strength I have at other positions will negate most of that, but not all of it. It's a team that can't make it up to the next tier and the top tier of this division until I can put another quarterback to go with Murray.
Right, and we should talk about your setup trade that you did before the Cam Newton signing. But
yes, of course.
The one thing that I wanted to add to this team, which now it's eluding me. I don't know what I was going to say. But yeah, so let's talk about the Stidham. You traded before the Cam Newton signing, and how much did you wind up giving up?
It was probably way too much. It was my Devy pick, my 2019 Devy pick, and first round pick in 2021. It was what he was worth at the time. It was my Hail Mary-ish play to get a second starting quarterback. It may still work out. It's not looking like it's going to be very likely, but I don't know. If anything happens and Stidham hits the field, then it gives me a little bit more flexibility in my week-to-week lineups.
Yeah. And I remember what I was going to say, Fred. A lot of my picks were really low too. I think I had one that was top 5, and I wound up trading it. So I also did what you did, where I did a lot of wheeling, dealing. My picks weren't as good as I'd hoped, but it still turned out all right. But I'm not going to talk about my team. I'm going to let Matt gush about your team a little bit, who also had you ranked 3rd. So if Stidham was the starting quarterback in New England, you think you even rank him higher, Matt?
I'll have to see the next two teams. I mean, I had them in a tier bracket of their own, so the answer is probably. I mean, at the very least, up in that top three of this league for sure. Wide receiver is just loaded. I mean, I think if McLaurin takes another step up, I mean, I think he could have 4 wide receiver ones on this team very, very easily. And then at running back, he's got Ingram, who's on the tail end, but he's got Dobbins right behind, so he's very well protected there. And I'm not sure if it was talked about yet, but Higbee has all the makings of up-and-coming stud tight end. Took him a couple years to get adapted to the NFL, so there's a lot to love about this team. I mean, if it's just that second quarterback that's really holding them back.
Yeah, and Donnie, you had him ranked the lowest at 5th. Why is that second quarterback going to hold back this team so much?
Well, I think just the methodology that I went into when I built these rankers was looking at what their starting lineup would look like if they were to submit it off their current roster. I think there's more than enough value here to go fix the second quarterback issue for a second time, and hopefully have it stick. But as the last team that we talked about proved, you can't guess that a team is going to make a good trade because they could just as easily make a bad trade, in your opinion. So I had to look at what roster would be fielded, or what this roster would field in a starting lineup, and the teams that I rank above them are going to beat them out by having a second quarterback. I watched last year all the teams that could only start one quarterback, even with a handful of studs on their team, and it makes it so hard to get above the tiebreaker mark and beat teams.
Yeah, and we have seen it before where a 1 QB team can be successful in a league like this, but they're definitely few and far between. But I certainly think that this team could. Now, would I recommend doing it? No, I would recommend trading for a QB, but you could get by and be a top team without it.
Yeah, I really thought I was not as bad off just because of my strength elsewhere until I looked at the guys that I have ranked in the top 2 positions in this division. And they have me matched essentially at the positions I'm strong in, plus they have at least 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah. And, well, hey, that's a good segue to get to our second place team among the rankers. And that is Real Betis with an average of 1.8 amongst us. Fred and I have him listed as the champion. Justin was the lowest at 3. If we look at how he did last season, he finished in 5th in La Liga. So we have him. Everybody has him stepping up from last season. And when I say he, I mean the 4-headed horseman that is Real Betis. 4 owners are listed on the site and are in our group mate. They did lose in round 1 of the Domestic Cup, and they made the quarterfinals of the Champions League. So one of the 3 teams that made it past the group stage in La Liga. And you can certainly see why with this roster that I will go over in just a second. He's got Deshaun Watson and Daniel Jones as his quarterbacks. At running back, he has Derrick Henry, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Le'Veon Bell. At receiver, he has Mike Evans, Cortland Sutton, Mike Williams, Robbie Anderson, and Kenny Stills. And I keep saying I should be saying. And they have Andrews and Knox at tight end. And the reason why, I'll go first, the reason why I have him as the champion is because with the studded RBs, Watson carrying the QB spot and great options at receiver with Andrews being the tight end that could step in the top 3 this year. I love it. I love every part of it. I don't see the weakness. A few injuries. I still think he has receivers that fill in while they get healthy, hopefully. So unless the injuries are devastating, I can't see him losing too much traction. I love Watson this year. I don't care that he doesn't have Hopkins. I think it's just going to make him run more to win games. So I'm a big Watson fan this year. And that's why I have him ranked as champion. And Fred, you also do. It's certainly got to be the running backs, right?
It is, and it's just solid everywhere, right? He's got one of the top 3-4 tight ends. He's got studs at receiver. He's got a stud quarterback plus an up-and-coming quarterback. He's got at least one stud running back, and he may still have three. And and plus he's still got Raheem Mostert on the roster as well. So it's a team that's got depth, it's got strength. It's doesn't take much for me to say that this is the strongest team in the division. The interesting thing is that I actually, in my opinion, made him a little bit weaker. We did a trade a few weeks ago, and I gave him Cortland Sutton and Dawson Knox. He gave me Terry McLaurin and Mark Ingram. So I thought it made my roster a lot stronger to have that solid running back, and I don't see a whole lot of difference between Sutton and McLaurin right now.
Yeah. If McLaurin could just get a good quarterback, I think he would just jump up to be elite, right? He does it despite shitty quarterback play, which is the scariest part about Scary Terry. But certainly out of nowhere.
It's not like Sutton's Pro Bowlers either.
True. Yeah, no, he's been solid. I mean, it's a little more crowded out in Denver, but he's quality out there. There's no doubt about that. Matt, you didn't have him ranked as the champion, and I know we're really picking, we're picking great teams among great teams, but why won't he win the title? Why won't they? I can't do it. Why won't they win the title?
Well, all 14 of them won't win the title because I'm not a huge fan of Daniel Jones. I think he's, going to be an average quarterback at best since your running back's really deep. Wide receiver, too, is a concern for me. I think on paper it might look a little bit better than it does, but some questions out of Mike Williams. I think he's injured again right now. New quarterback there in LA. And then Robbie Anderson. I know he's reunited with Matt Rule there in Carolina, but does his skill set really mesh with what Teddy Bridgewater wants to do? I think there's questions there. So I could see a regression out of those two guys still. And then at tight end, it's Mark Andrews. And then there's a couple guys I like here as far as upside. Dan Arnold's being talked about a lot in Arizona. Don't know if I believe that. Trey Burton in Indy. Don't know if I believe that. So it's really just one guy there at tight end. So definite holes, but like you said, it's nitpicking. This is a really solid team.
Yeah, and coming off fifth of last year, so improvements made by the 14 owners of Real Betis. Donnie, you agree with Matt there, or is there another reason why you don't have him as the title favorite?
Similar reasons. I think I like Dawson Knox a bit, so I feel a little bit better about the tight ends maybe than Matty does. But I think I probably maybe dislike the running backs more than he does, and that kind of balances it out. Besides Derrick Henry, I think is going to regress, not progress. There's a lot of distrust that I would have running those guys out. Again, I've talked about my opinions on CEH already. I think he's in a good position and in a good situation, but he is a rookie running back, and he's got to go out there and protect Mahomes. And there's some quality running backs still behind him with the shortened camp that could eat into that, especially early on. I think J.D. McKissick is actually getting some buzz around campus, stepping up with the hole left there, so that could be exciting. But besides that, I think there's a lot of guys that I won't probably be drafting at all in my leagues this year, just because they're going way earlier than I feel comfortable taking them. And kind of similar on the wide receiver. I mean, do you really trust a lot of these guys after you look past Mike Evans to feel really strong about starting many of them? Those are what makes this the number 2 team instead of the top team for me.
Sure. Yeah, and despite these things we're saying, there's still 1 or 2, right? We're still seeing the massive upside. I mean, it takes you not liking many of these guys and not drafting them to be your second team. So right. we're looking at a hopefully a fun title race here in La Liga. Yep. And we might as well go ahead and talk about our consensus champion, which is Atletico Madrid, who, if we're looking at the rankings, an average of 1.4, with Matt, Donnie, and Justin having him as the champion, and Fred and I having him as the runner-up. So, again, he's the reigning champion in La Liga. He won the Domestic Cup, and he lost to Real Zaragoza in the finals of the Champions League. So he was one step away from winning our little, what we call our treble pot or empire pot. in the first year. So what an awesome season for Chris, who's been in plenty of our leagues in the past. And you can certainly see why with this roster that we think could repeat the same success he had last year. Matt Ryan and Tom Brady at quarterback, Aaron Jones, Leonard Fournette, and Latavius Murray at running back, Chris Godwin, Calvin Ridley, Marvin Jones, and A.J. Green at receiver, and Travis Kelce at tight end. The team is solid all around. He's got major depth at receiver. I mean, I don't know if he traded for A.J. Green or if he sat on his bench all last year, but either way, that's insane. Certainly just pieces all around for Chris here that make him a title contender. Donnie, we'll go reverse. We'll start with you. Why is he going to win?
Yeah, I like the team a lot. I think what's crazy about it though is out of all the teams so far that we've talked about that we like to a certain degree in this top 5-6 range, I don't know if there's a team that could look quite so poor in like 1 to 2 years. Because you've got a lot of age and situational change coming at several key positions here. I mean, both quarterbacks, if they retired next year, you wouldn't be all that surprised. Maybe a little surprised Matt Ryan, but if Matt Ryan has a down year and he retired next year, I don't think anybody would be nearly as surprised as Andrew Luck retiring. You've got his top 2 running backs in Fournette and Aaron Jones, both in contract years, and who knows what situation they go to next year. Could easily get worse for Fournette. Probably not going to get worse for Aaron Jones, but maybe he's coming off a great season where he scored a ton of touchdowns. And then AJ Green, I think he's going to be good this year if he can get on the field, but also a little bit old there. So it's crazy how many of these top pieces. And Kelce is no spring chicken either. So you've got a lot of really top pieces that you wonder, are they going to be here in 2 to 3 years? So it's for me, it's the easy number 1 team, but you really wonder what it looks like in like 2 years.
Yeah. And Matt, why don't you continue gushing over this team?
I don't know if I can gush about it. I think looking at this team, I was flip-flopping between Atletico and Betis, during my rankings this afternoon. And the more I look at it now, the more I think I do like Betis a little bit better than him. To be honest, it's lame, but it's a solid team. I mean, I think what's really interesting is he's got a nice little stack with Tom Brady to Chris Godwin, and he's got another one with Ryan to Ridley. That's fairly interesting. Just a lot of top end pieces on this team. If Brady, I know he was kind of average last year, and he's definitely on the tail end of his career. But there's just so many options there in Tampa. I don't see how he's not, a top 12 quarterback. And I love Ryan this year. So that's kind of what did it for me, just those top 2 quarterbacks. And there are depth issues on this team, not just the veterans that might leave, but wide receiver, there's fat in that area. Some tight ends I don't really care about. So yeah, that's going to be a concern. But for this year, he just, at every position, he's got players. So
yeah, and an interesting point on the stacks. With the way our league, you can draw on bad matchups or 2 high-scoring matchups. The stacks certainly help where you could get a leg up, with 2 touchdowns on one play. I didn't even think about adding that. I don't know if it makes a big difference, but certainly something I should think about a little more. Fred, you don't have him as your favorite, but we still love the team. Being me and you ranked them both at second. Where can he improve where you would put him as number 1?
So this was a roster that last year had 3 starting quarterbacks, and now he's got Jameis Winston sitting on his bench doing nothing essentially for the entire 2020 season, barring something catastrophic happening in New Orleans. That was a significant portion of the reason why he was able to be consistent last year. Was even when his top quarterback or any quarterback had a bye week, he had it covered with another starter. So he was always able to play 2. Same thing with Fournette and Aaron Jones. I think he was looking at 2 career years for both of those guys. And the only, they're still going to be great. I just don't see them being 2019 great again this year. That's the reason I have him in second place. It's just some baked in regression, and it's a good mix of old and young, but he may be actually leaning a little too old right now in terms of a dynasty roster. It's a really intriguing redraft team, but I just don't know if he's going to be able to survive on this setup for much longer without making some structural changes to the way this roster is constructed.
Right. Yeah. And I think along the lines of regression, I don't see the amount of elite talent that Real Betis has acquired that Atletico could match him. And that's why I have him ranked at 2, because he's still got all those options and he's still got everyone he can start. But I think they don't perform as well as they did last season, as well as Winston not being, able to play. And it just falls short. Not anything, breaking. He'll still be right there. He can still make a move, but that's where I have him as it stands right now as well. But yeah, so there it is for La Liga. Our power rankings for 2020. Does anyone have anything to add that we missed over the course of these rankings? Nothing. All right.
I just want somebody to trade me a quarterback. Lose a week or two, decide you're out of it, and then sell it off. Yeah,
well, there's certainly a few teams we went through today that have 3 quarterbacks, and there's teams in other leagues that have 3 quarterbacks too, Fred. So you're not you could buy one without taking a starter, and I'm sure there's a team or two maybe after seeing these rankings where they're like, hey, maybe I should be selling these quarterbacks. So maybe more people will be selling as the season approaches.
Yeah, I need to start telling all the teams that they're terrible and they need to play for next year.
Well, we'll look forward to that. Matt and I have some work to do. We should have an announcement before the waivers run on Wednesday about IR spots with coronavirus news, and we need to do the Europa League very shortly too, Matt. So
the schedule, and we need to get the schedule created.
Yeah, we got our work cut out for us, and you got what, 10 days?
Yeah.
Okay. So
we're gonna have a fun Labor Day weekend.
Just make 3 weeks. Just make 3 weeks worth of schedule. You're probably going to be good.
That's all you need.
I want to be more optimistic than that. But
you should.
Yeah, for us here at the UEFA podcast, thank you so much for listening. We will catch you guys hopefully on Thursday with EPL rankings, which will round out our division. Stay tuned for coronavirus update and Europa update and anything else we feel necessary. But until then, have a pleasant evening.
Take care.